It was a ghastly tale of a winter's night. One of an invisible killer and a crime perpetrated on the pavement along Briar Road. As the victim lay at death's door, the mystery of just who had stabbed the young lady from behind had been resolved. But no sooner had my friend saved that Eastern Exchange student from his harrowing plight than in the dim, flickering shadows of gaslight did a second bizarre crime rend the stillness of that very night. I dare say most can still recall the sensational headlines of the day. Haunted apartment of death, the condemned criminal's curse, the dread demon of coal gas. Yet, though the great detective had at once discerned the truth upon his arrival at the scene, it only proved to be the overture that announced the rising of the curtain on a most tragic play.
My name is Ryanosuke Naruhodo. I'm a fledgling lawyer, just starting out on my journey. So this is where we get the Shakespeare. This is where the Shakespearean actor guy comes in, okay? Because he was delayed over the second game before he became relevant. I was like thinking that he would like show up in some later case in the first game, but I was wrong. He would be saved for the second game. So this isn't as complicated enough for me to like make like a script or anything for this, like a document or something. We have this series of outstanding questions. What is Susato's father hiding? What is the judge hiding? Why did the government, it's pretty clear, enlist Brett to kill John H. Wilson? What is that whole government secret about with the list of 4 names? Why does no one in Japan but the people close to Kazuma know that Kazuma died? Why didn't it make the press? And so on. Like, what is the big conspiracy? What does that... But what, if anything, does that have to do with Bartok van Zyk? And what, if anything, that has to do with the Grand Chief Justice, which I forgot his name, right? The guy who likes clocks. And what does that have to do with why Susato was suddenly called back to Japan? With a pretext. So the only thing I can really figure right now is the list of 4 people that were in that government secret message was a hit list. So those are 4 people that were supposed to be killed. If I remember correct, I don't know if I 100% remember who the 4 names were correctly. I could have written it down, but I didn't. And I could go back and watch the footage from when I played that part, or go back and replay it. However, with mystery games, that's like a dangerous, you should consume the media as if you weren't recording it. So, going back and watching past recordings is kind of cheating. You wouldn't be able to do that with ordinary gameplay. So I have to go off this, just my head memory of what the 4 names were. And I think was Susato, Kazuma, John H. Wilson, and Shin? If I'm not mistaken. We don't know who Shin is. But that might be the victim in this second chapter case. We'll have to see. The reason why I think that might be the case is because this case we're about to play now has, is supposed to be really important for figuring out the answer to this big riddle. And I think this is a hit list. These are people to be killed, so he would be killed in the case. But I think, didn't Susato say she didn't recognize that name, though? So if she didn't recognize it, then he's not the victim in this case. Whatever. We'll see. So John H. Wilson was killed, and presumably by Brett, and Brett was like an assassin sent to do it by the British government. That's why the British government wanted to cover up that she did it. They wanted to corrupt her trial. and why the British government lets her go free, even though she committed a murder, is going to have her extradited to Britain and then just not prosecute her. It's because she did it on order. Kazuma was also on the hit list, you would think, but the reason why I think it's a hit list is because I think Brett was like a hit man, or a hit woman, whatever you want to call her, is that Kazuma's death was an accident. It was done by a Russian ballerina, not anybody who was British. So you could argue that Kazuma was like on a list of people to die, but he died by a different way beforehand, by accident. And so they just kind of like did what they would have done if they would have murdered him, which is cover up that they did so, but they didn't even do it. It's just in their nature to cover it up, because that's what their plan was. And then, because somehow Susato's father knew that she was slated to be killed, so he called her back to Japan in order to try to protect her from something bad happening to her in Britain. But you would think that if she was called back to Japan, they would have killed her in that process. Right? So it's weird how that could potentially rescue her. That's kind of dangerous. Right? That she could get killed on the ship. So, I don't know how he thought that would work, but it somehow did, and she's still alive. But that kind of gives us explanation for why John H. Wilson was killed, to some degree. There's something we don't know yet. Why Kazuma was covered up, kind of, and why Susato was called back, kind of. The reason why it doesn't solve everything is, again, Kazuma was an accident, which is weird, and two, we don't know why those 4 people were to be killed. You know, the motive. So, and I would think it would have something to do with the Lord Chief Justice somehow. It just seems like a final boss to me. Anyway. So I kind of see how they kind of managed to tuck this case away, though, because this case happened right after the previous case involving the literature guy, whatever his name is. And so it would have still been approximately 2 months since this case when they did the final chapter, right? The Hound of the Baskervilles, the one where they revisit Magnus McGilded, and Gino was the accused. That happened 2 months after the trial involving the what's his face? Oh, 6 months ago. Okay. This is a flash forward. So, it would have happened right after the previous case involving the writer, so the time spans would be about the same, so it would make the dialogue work, and be able to kind of hide this case in the dialogue. So I presume this is happening 6 months later, which is 4 months after the end of the last game. He's recollecting on what happened, I guess 6 months ago. Having made the long voyage across the sea from the Empire of Japan to here, London, England, and on the way, in quite extraordinary circumstances, I made the acquaintance of a world-famous detective. Currently, I reside in the attic of the detective's own lodgings, from where I run my legal consultancy of sorts. I've successfully defended a number of clients in Britain's highest court, the Old Bailey. Wait, there's some, kind of cases in between here? This is a particularly grueling and unforgettable legal battle 4 months ago now. I haven't returned to the courtroom. In fact, I lost my right to return. But that epic trial was just one small part of an epic tale, a tale which was now about to awaken from slumber. Wait, he got disbarred because he used, false evidence and false testimony in the Magnus McGilded trial? Is that why? Or because he insisted on playing government secrets in public? Thanks to a letter that arrived this morning from my homeland. I presume that's Wagahai. Oh. And what a delicious smell wafting up the stairs. It must be nearly time for breakfast. I better go down to Mr. Sholm's suite and say good morning to the great detective and his flatmate. I don't even get to examine the room again. Ah, Runo, good. I was just about to call up to you. The bacon's ready. Good morning, Iris. It smells delicious as usual. Before we eat, though, I have some news. I had a surprise this morning. Shh, not another word, Mr. Naruhodo. Oh, he got his, analytoscope back. This could be just the abstruse thing for my pre-breakfast stagnation repelling mental stimulation, my dear fellow. Morning to you, Mr. Sholmes. Ah, yes. I see. So that's it. The truth is as clear to me as day. My faculties of observation have revealed it again. What are you talking about? You, Mr. Naruhodo, you have this very morning met with a surprise. Didn't I just tell you that? Well, is that not the case? Really, my dear fellow, it barely warrants explanation. Firstly, your hair is particularly unkempt, somewhat reminiscent of a bird's nest. Secondly, you have neglected to fasten the third button of your jacket. Clearly, when considered together, these two facts point to you having been flustered this morning. Can I talk now? But of course. Though I don't look for admiration, you understand. My hair always looks like this. It's been this way since I first met you. Oh, it has? And the button was ripped off last night, if you remember. By you. Hurley pulled the button off? Ah, yes, I recall the incident now. It was after supper, was it not? As the evening advanced, I picked up my violin and began to play the wailing notes of a haunting tune. But then, in my utter dismay, the third string snapped. Why did it have to happen? Why? So he lost his A string? Little wonder then that in my vexation I grabbed the first button I saw and ripped it from its proper place. Well, I like it back now, please. It's troubling me that I can't fasten my jacket. And it's troubling me that you expect me to know where it is. Somewhere thereabouts on the floor, one presumes. Helpful. What matters at the present time, my dear fellow, is simply whether or not my deduction was unerring. But Hurley, Runo said it when he came in, didn't he? I had a surprise this morning. Well, that really is a surprise. Yes, this man is the pride of the British Empire, the famous consulting detective, Mr. Sherlock Holmes. There can't be a single person in the world who doesn't know his name. Alright then, enough with this silly conversation. Come and eat this bacon before it goes cold. And I have a new herbal tea for you to try too, my latest special blend. And here we have Iris Wilson, another character we have to introduce all over again, just in case you haven't played the first game. Mr. Sholmes' lodger and companion. A truly exceptional young girl who's the author of a highly successful serialization here in London. Yes, The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, as published in Ranced magazine. So, Mr. Naruhodo, won't you put us out of our misery? What surprised you this fine morning? Oh, well, I received a letter from Japan. Oh, from Susie, you mean? Was it really? That's right, and she had some rather startling news, in fact. Ah, intriguing indeed. You must tell us what about it over breakfast. Oh yes, what fun. That machine really is imposing, isn't it? But I can never remember its name. Hurley calls it his great analytoscope. It can analyze anything at all. That doesn't really help me. What does analyzing something even mean? An extremely astute question, Mr. Naruhodo. Sorry? Well, as Iris said, my machine here spits out analysis results of anything with which you care to present it. But how to interpret those results, that's the key, and I confess I have no idea. Clearly I'm going to have to construct a great analytoscope to solve the problem. That might not help. Books, papers, scientific implements. These shelves are stuffed to the gunnels. Miss Usato wouldn't be able to help herself if she were here. She can't stand mess. Susie might not be able to stand mess, but she wouldn't dare touch those shelves. Oh, why not? Everything's in intricate balance. Hurley spends ages on it. If you were to touch even one thing, the whole lot would come tumbling down. Ha. Susie noticed it was a very delicate arrangement right from the outset. You make it sound like a meeting of great minds. But the truth is, Mr. Sholmes just needs to tidy up. Ah yes, Mr. Sholmes' faithful musical companion. Wasn't this violin made by somebody famous? Yes, it's a Stradivarius. Though I'm afraid you'd have to save up for 100 years before you could afford one, Runo. But didn't you buy it for a song, Mr. Sholmes? I found it at a pawnbrokery among the forfeited articles. It clearly said Stradivarius on the label. So it's not a Strad, actually. What? The ignorant broker had no idea of its true value, you see, so I paid a mere 55 shillings for it. Sounds like you had no idea of its true value either, Mr. Sholmes. Yes, I have something of a turn for shopping. Hairlock Sholmes, bargain hunter. But is it really a Stradivarius then? But of course, my dear fellow, it said so on the label. I think perhaps the ignorant broker had something of a turn for selling. When it gets to this time of year, Londoners seem to leave their hearths alight all day long, and I love it. There's something very relaxing about watching the flames flit and dance about. But a fireplace in days of summertime is a waste of space, really. No use at all. Rather like a great detective in days of no crimes and no criminals, Hurley? But consider this. Instead of a fireplace, a frost place. That's my latest idea. You just have like endothermic reactions go on in there. An extraordinary hearth from which emanates a cool breeze in the hot summer months. What do you think? I think if you invented such a thing, your name would go down in history. The principle is extremely simple. One must, of course, light a cold fire in the hearth. Yes, of course, brilliant. The trouble is, none of the fires I build ever burn cold. How it taunts me. So as you British say, it's a bit of a damp squib. Ah yes, the huge metal chest with the lace cloth laid on it, being used as a table for tea and coffee. It's very sturdy, that's for sure, and firmly locked shut. The chest contains my father's detailed records of Hurley's many cases. Yes, I've been led to believe, though personally I've never actually seen inside. That's the way it will stay. Those papers are a secret between Daddy and me. If you go opening it uninvited, you might find yourself being bitten. What, is there a beast inside there or something? These are different pieces of evidence from cases you've solved, aren't they, Mr. Sholmes? Not quite, Mr. Naruhodo, not quite. These trinkets are a selection from cases I've solved with particular aplomb. They are survivors, souvenirs of my success. Memoirs, Mr. Naruhodo, memoirs. Really, so tell me about the case in which the bust of Napoleon featured. I forget. Memories, he says. Wonderful, Mr. Sholmes, wonderful. Again, more thermodynamics, more heat engines. Ah yes, this is where you note down ideas, isn't it, Iris? What's in the melting pot today? The blue carbuncle. Yes, it's from a case of theft that Hurley solved ages ago. The theft of a precious stone. A carbuncle is another name for a garnet, you see, especially if it's cut with a rounded top. Oh, really? And this garnet was blue, wasn't it? Well, that's the thing. They're usually red. No blue garnets have ever been discovered. Oh. So who knows what the stolen gemstone actually was? That's the real mystery of the case. A proper Hairlock Sholmes conundrum, huh? I look forward to finding out what aroma your tea will have, Iris, every single day. Oh, well, I infuse a different concoction of herbs from the garden every time, so it's never the same twice. You could accidentally get spiked tea that way, but okay. When you call it a concoction, it sounds more like a science experiment than something for tea time. Oh yes, that's because different blends can have very different properties. Some calm you down, some make you feel jolly, some give you energy. Today's particular blend is something quite special, so you're really in for a treat. That sounds ominous. Well, this game is not like rated M, so it can't be that bad, can it? There are so many different bottles up there on that charming little set of white shelves. Oh, do be careful, Runo. You mustn't try the contents of any of those bottles, even if you're hungry. I wouldn't do something stupid like that. I'm not a child, you know. Well, I wish I could say the same for Hurley. The other day, he polished off a full bottle of one of my alkaloids. He what? He said he was hungry. I'll be extra careful. I can type with my eyes shut, you know. I can believe it. When a deadline's approaching, you sound like a Gatling gun. That reminds me of a dream I had the other day. It was such a funny one. It woke me actually. I was typing for a whole hour in the pitch black, but I didn't make a single mistake. That's incredible. But then, when it got light, I found that there wasn't any paper in the machine. Now I wonder if I'd actually been typing at all. I think you might just have fallen asleep on the job. Okay, I think I got it all. What? The office spade. Now that Susato-san's gone, the shovelers aren't represented to correct me. Maybe I'll have to do it myself. That's not a spade, Naruhodo-san, it's a shovel. Susato-san's tea set that she left here with me. I still think green tea is just too bitter, though. Thank goodness for sugar and milk. Mr. Sholmes certainly wasn't expecting the acrid taste that one time. I've never heard anyone let out a scream like that before, or seen anyone fall down the stairs quite like that either. It always brings a smile to my lips when I'm feeling a little down. The kettle's gently simmering away there on top of the stove as usual. It was kind of Susato-san to send that Japanese tea. Iris really likes it. Oh. But for me, it's the sound of the stove and burning kettle I like the most, on biting winter mornings. Now at first glance, my desk here might look as though it's a mess. However, it's not in a mess at all. Everything is exactly where I want it to be. But whenever Susato-san looked at it, she'd put her hand on her hips and say, "Oh dear." Her way of saying that I should make it a more orderly and neat mess. I miss that. It's Susato-san's desk. I suppose it won't get used now that she's gone back to Japan. It'll just have to wait here patiently for its old friend to return. Look at the prawns and the anemones gently swaying around in the tank. Regular cleaning, some food, and fresh seawater is all they need, and some conversation, of course. It seemed like a lot of effort at first, but it was worth it. I'm starting to be able to tell what they're thinking. Funny to think that so many people in London had aquariums like this one when they were in vogue. You'd never expect to find sea anemones in the middle of the capital. I think I'll have to name them soon. I never did see what Susato-san's room looks like. I could go in now, of course, but I don't dare. They say a young maiden's private chamber is a place of bittersweet secrets. Although from the laughter I used to hear when Iris would visit, I imagine it's mainly sweet. Okay, got that done. Got the examine done. Present this, of course, always. Oh, Mr. Sholmes, about this. Shh, not another word. Ah, yes, I see. This would be a collar for a breed of miniature canine with a particularly long neck, and for winter use. Actually, it's the armband I always wear that symbolizes my role as a defense lawyer. Precisely, which leads us to but one conclusion. Your arm is, in fact, the particularly long neck of a miniature canine. I'm starting to wish I'd never shown him this now. The man's barking mad. This is the letter that arrived from Japan this morning, by international post. Oh, how lovely. Look at Susie's beautiful writing. I wish I could read it. And how is your judicial assistant faring, may I ask? She's very well, thank you. In fact, according to what she's written, she actually appeared as a lawyer at the Japanese Supreme Court and won a case. Really? Oh, isn't she wonderful? A cut above your good self, my dear fellow. I've won cases too, you know. Yeah, but she did all the work. Apparently, Mr. Natsume appeared in the trial as a witness. Natsume. No, I don't recall that name. Of course you do. We helped the man twice. You know, in those 2 cases that took place on Briar Road 6 months ago. Ah, the mustached, twitchy man with the somewhat feline eyes and the mustache. You said mustache twice. You didn't have 2 mustaches, Hurley. Yes, who could forget those 2 cases? They made a very deep impression on me. Although I must confess, the details are a little hazy now. A very deep impression they made on you. Clearly. So, what was this startling news penned by Miss Susato? Do you remember the case of the haunted lodgings, Mr. Sholmes? Ah yes, it's very interesting, you know. I don't feel entirely uncertain that a case of that nature did not occur. He's totally forgotten then. Anyway, in her letter, Miss Susato asked that we read over her case notes again and investigate further. Though it took place half a year ago, for what purpose? Because of something that Mr. Natsume said to her, apparently. He suggested that the real reason why she was called back to Japan so suddenly might have something to do with that case of the haunted lodgings. Oh. On Mr. Natsume's return to Japan, Miss Susato's father questioned him about the case, she said. And something Mr. Natsume said appeared to trouble Professor Mikotoba, prompting him to send that telegram. Oh, that case, yes. It was very strange, wasn't it? Yes. And I had compiled the whole story into a nice, neat manuscript ready for publication, too. But then Hurley here was all funny about it, remember? It was very mean. That story must not be published, he said. Very mysterious as well. Really? I said that? Are you sure? Yeah, he knows government secrets, so he's kind of, yeah. Do you perhaps know something about it as well, Mr. Sholmes? About why Miss Susato was suddenly told 4 months ago that she had to return to Japan? It's been 4 months since we waved Susie off at Dover. It was such a shock, wasn't it? The way she just suddenly announced that she had to go back to Japan. Indeed it was, due to a telegram she received from her homeland, I believe. That's right, telling her to return urgently. Yes, because her father had passed away. Not quite, no. It just said he was suffering from a high fever, the cause of which was unknown. He's not dead. But according to this letter, that news about her father's fever was just a ruse. A ruse? So Susie's daddy lied to her so that she'd make the voyage back home? Why would he do that? I have to admit, I have absolutely no idea, but she believes it's almost certainly related to the case of the haunted lodgings. Summoning her back to Japan so suddenly like that, I wonder what Miss Susato's father is hiding. Hurley, do you know what it's all about? Suddenly got all serious. Put on the serious clothes. Oh well, who can say? What, but you said... Please, I have engagements, my dear fellow. My calendar is quite surprisingly full today. And a stringent analysis of the matter would be excessive, I feel, even if I were quite at leisure. So, man the fort in my absence, won't you, Iris? I will, Hurley, don't worry. See you later. He scuttled off rather quickly there. I think perhaps Professor Mikotoba isn't the only person hiding something here. Soseki-san was involved in 2 cases, but only one of them was forbidden from being published. By, of all people, Mr. Sholmes. Aha, I found them at last. Iris, are they? The notes about the case? That's right. Susie and I compiled them together. The case, the haunted lodgings. Do you want to read them, Runo? Absolutely. Thank you, Iris. Okay, I'm gonna do some benching, come back and read these. Okay, I got done with things and stuff, and I'm back. I have no idea what secrets could still be hiding in the shadows of this case. But perhaps if I read over the notes again, something might come to light. That's the spirit. And so, the flashback began. Iris and I decided to read over the case notes again together. Everything from what happened to our investigation, and that fierce battle in court that followed. Reliving every detail. I just need to find a clue, and I have all the time in the world. Because of course, I'm no longer allowed to practice law in the courts of Great Britain. It was 6 months ago, a mysterious incident that unfolded on the wintry streets of London. A young woman was found lying on the snowy pavement of Briar Road with a knife in her back. Fortunately, her life was spared, but she was unconscious for several days following the incident. The fog was thick and nobody saw her attacker, but by a cruel twist of fate, a visiting Japanese student was walking behind her at the time and was duly arrested. That man was Soseki-san, and the man who effected his arrest was Mr. Sholmes. Believing in our compatriot's innocence, Susato-san and I decided to represent Soseki-san in court. And after a grueling trial of many twists and turns, finally managed to prove his innocence. Was the man's reaction after the trial, but his jubilant jubilation was short-lived. We received a telegram from Mr. Sholmes the following morning. The victim of the Briar Road stabbing has regained consciousness. Hurry to Bart's at once. So Susato-san and I summoned a handsome, and headed immediately to the hospital. There you are at last. Good morning, Mr. Sholmes. I think not. Oh? You're late. What on earth took you so long? Your telegram only arrived at 5 o'clock, Mr. Sholmes, and it's 20 minutes it's a 20-minute ride to the hospital. That's right, and it's 5:30 now. I think we made very good time. The time is utterly irrelevant. The fact is I have been waiting for what has felt like an eternity. Ha. In point of fact, I myself was awoken at 4 this morning by a telegram boy, and feeling it was somewhat unjust that I alone had been roused at such an hour, I sent one to you. Well, thanks for that. Anyway, you're here now, so the victim is over there. She's only just regained consciousness. And always, when the victim regains consciousness, you immediately bombard them with people, because that's just the right thing to do. Happens in real life too. I don't know why this is like, no, like you let them like you have someone walk in there and say, okay, we know you've regained consciousness, just kind of hang in for a while. You don't want to bombard you with people, right? You might be feeling a little sick, but you have to have some person in there to be like, acknowledge that we noticed you regained consciousness, so you're not feeling like you're sitting in there like entombed or something. But you don't want to just bombard them with people and questions and instructions and things. Anyway. But for some reason it happens anyway. You should introduce yourselves, and I shall observe from here. So that's the lady who was found on the snow-covered pavement with a knife in her back. Her name is, yes, here we are, Miss Green. They're probably not gonna let me examine until I talk to Miss Green first, but I'm gonna do this anyway. Look, there's a photograph in this frame here. Oh yes, it's a picture of a young gentleman. Is this the culprit? He looks to be about the same age as Miss Green, I would say. Perhaps the young woman's special someone, do you think? My, Mr. Naruhodo, I didn't know you had a sense for matters of the heart. Not in the least. I sincerely said the first thing I thought of. This rounded wooden figure isn't the most charming, is it? Oh, I don't think that's a decoration, Mr. Naruhodo. It's an artist's mannequin, I believe, used when practicing sketching the human form in different poses. Really? It's not exactly what you'd call a typical figure for that purpose, though, is it? No, I suppose not. I confess I've never seen one quite so full-figured before. Well, if you want to draw a full-figured person, it's the right tool for the job. Oh, this looks like the patient's treatment notes. Let's see, let's violate some HIPAA. Do not feed. What is this place, a zoo? You know, I seem to remember seeing an almost identical sign in our local park. For the pigeons, yes. This is a person. Poor woman, I hope she hasn't read this. Let's examine the rat. Nothing particular to note. Eek, a mouse, Mr. Naruhodo, an enormous mouse. Vermin in a hospital, that doesn't seem to seem the best. It looks like a very healthy specimen, doesn't it? It's very plump. I'm not sure we can say that's down to the excellence of this facility, if that's what you were thinking. That must be a bag of Miss Green's personal belongings. She would have been brought directly here after she was found stabbed on the pavement, though. I expect a friend or family member probably brought some things for her. Alright then, let's see what's inside. A change of clothes, no doubt, and don't just go in the things. No, Mr. Naruhodo, you must never scrutinize a young maiden's personal belongings. But the young maiden might have chocolates or biscuits or caramel. What, you're just gonna eat them? There are lots of bottles in that cabinet, aren't there? Do you think it's safe to keep them like that? Hehe. If you were a patient here, I feel sure you take some medicine by mistake when you were half asleep. that is a worry, but at least the cabinet has a lock, even if it's only a flimsy-looking one. Oh, I've no doubt you managed to unlock that somehow while you were half asleep as well. There are limits even to what I can do when I'm half asleep, you know, Miss Susato. Oh, there's a toggle over here. Oh, this looks like the treatment notes for whoever's occupying this bed. Let's see. Do not permit to run around the hospital. The patient doesn't seem to be here at the moment, so he or she is probably running around the hospital then. Oh dear. How worrying. What's worrying is why they haven't discharged the patient yet. There are all sorts of medicines in this cabinet, look. I'm not sure if it's safe leaving them in reach of everyone like this. Yes, you're right. I can imagine if you were peckish, you would try a whole bottle or two. Well, at least there seems to be a little lock to secure the cabinet doors. I don't imagine that would stop you if you were hungry. I worry that you'd break the lock. Hunger doesn't turn me into a criminal, you know, Miss Susato. Just let me click that. Okay. Guess I got it all. I hope so. Okay. Good morning. Hello, I'm Ryanosuke Naruhodo from the Empire of Japan. Oh no, was it your knife that... Are you the man who... No, I'm a lawyer. And I'm Susato Miko Toba, pleased to meet you. Oh no, was it your knife then? Are you the one? No, I assure you. I'm Mr. Naruhodo's judicial assistant. We heard that you regained consciousness and wanted to come give you our best wishes. Best wishes for me? Thank you. I'm olive green. I'm an artist. Well, no, that's not right, is it? What I mean is I'm trying to be an artist. Well, what I really mean is I desperately want to be an artist. The truth is, I don't have any talent. I know I don't. It's no wonder I was stabbed in the back. I don't think that's related, actually. Gosh, this young lady seems to bend over backwards to put herself down. Seeing as we're here, we should ask her about what happened from her perspective, I suppose. You suddenly be struck in the back by a blade as you were walking along the pavement. What a terrible experience you had, Miss Green. It was so cold that day, and the fog was so thick. I couldn't see a thing. That was 4 days ago now, I think. Is that right? Yes, that's right. I'm afraid you've been comatose all that time. But the case has been solved, hasn't it? While I've been here in the hospital, I mean. Indeed it has, my dear madame, spectacularly, by none other than I, Herr Sholmes. Mr. Sholmes, as you well know, it was Mr. Naruhodo's hard work in court to solve the case. Are you yet to hear what happened, Miss Green? Yes, I'm afraid so. A gentleman from the police force is supposed to be coming to fill me in shortly. Oh, I see. Me coming round seems to have made everyone frantically busy. I'm so sorry, I should never have regained consciousness. It was selfish of me. We're all relieved that you're on the mend, Miss Green. Really, we are. With that kind of attitude, maybe her surname should be Blue, not Green. So, you're an artist, are you, Miss Green? Oh no, I couldn't possibly claim that. I'm a fledgling artist at best. I mean, I'm a student of art, really, at the Thorndike Academy of Fine Arts. Oh my, an Academy of Fine Arts. Great Britain is such a wonderful country. Tell me, Miss Green, do you live hereabouts? Oh no, actually. I don't deserve it, but I have a little flat on Brixton Road. I see. How very interesting. Oh no, is it? Brixton is some 10 stops away on the underground from here, and Thorndyke Academy is a mere 3-minute walk from Brixton Town Center. Does that matter, Mr. Sholmes? Perhaps not, but Briar Road is a far less salubrious part of town by comparison, dwelt in by those of inferior means, including the maleficent Mr. Mustache. Inferior means, I suppose Soseki-san does fit the bill. It struck me as somewhat out of the ordinary for a young fine arts student to be walking in such a district. That's all. What's this? She suddenly clammed up. Mr. Sholmes, you should be ashamed of yourself, prying into a young maid's private affairs. Hahaha. Oh dear me, do forgive me. If you don't mind. I'm being discharged shortly, so I need to pack up my things. Yes, of course, we don't keep you. We don't keep you. Thank you so much, Miss Green. Is there a Mr. Narrow Fodder here? Mr. Narrow Fodder? Narrow Fodder now? Well, if you're looking for Naruhodo, the lawyer, that's me, but... Mr. Narrow Fodder, good. This is for you. It's a message from Mr. Saucy Nutsmeg. Mr. Natsume sent a message to me? Well, why would a policeman be delivering a message from Mr. Natsume? Exactly. What's going on? He got arrested again. What's a Scotland Yard constable doing playing delivery boy at this time in the morning? Oh, what are you waiting for? Let me see that. Oh. Well, this is most unexpected. Is something wrong, Mr. Sholmes? Is something wrong, Mr. Sholmes, he says. Have you not seen this note? No, how could I have? It would seem that London's criminals have no intention of letting the great detective rest. A new case calls, a case of murder no less. We must depart at once. Murder? Call a cab. Time is of the essence. But the trouble is, we've yet to read Mr. Natsume's note. I was thinking we ought to pay him a visit in his lodgings once we did. That will be entirely convenient. Convenient? What do you mean? It's all here in the note, my dear fellows. The murder we must investigate took place at Mr. Mustache's lodgings. Wait, what? I'll hail a farce at once. It was only yesterday that Soseki-san was in court and we were dispelling doubts about his innocence. And now, the very next day, there's a murder at the man's own address. He may very well be the unluckiest man alive. Or so it seemed to us at the time, but we were soon to discover he was worse than we thought. What on earth? Oh my, the gentleman is deceased without question. He's dead. Locum student Mr. Naruhodo, Esquire. Mr. Natsume. Why? Why is this happening? Why to me? I've only just got out of court yesterday. I was finally home after 2 days of misery. And then I wake up the next day to this. No early bird should catch a worm like this. Woeful worm without wiggle. I see you're in high spirits again this morning, Mr. Mustache. Not the horrible hairlock Sholmes. Phew, shove off. Show yourself the door. I never invited you. Mr. Sholmes came here with us. I'm quite sure he'll be able to help you, Mr. Natsume. I am entirely at your disposal, Mr. Mustache. What can I do for you? Ah! Here they are already, the busybodies. Ah, Inspector Gregson. What a pleasant surprise. Pleasant, is it? Give me heartburn every time I see your face at a crime scene, Sholmes. Ah, I deduce, Inspector, that your heartburn is a result of your excessive consumption of fried food. Good morning, Inspector. This is a crime scene. Don't you go touching anything. Or good morning to you too, Sunshine. Let's touch some stuff. Oh, I said hands off. You don't mess with the crime scene. Oh, no, I just wanted to look. That's all. No chance. I know you're kind. You'll mess it up just by looking at it. Someone's in a bad mood. There is certainly some bad air in here, isn't there? Ah ha 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 ha. Alright, sounds like I'd better talk to the inspector first to try to curry some favor. Let's talk to this guy instead. What a terrible thing to have happened. It's only been 3 days since I was arrested for the incident on the pavement outside. And then, having finally regained my freedom, it starts happening all over again. Endless existence of excruciating experiences. So the victim lived here on the ground floor, and your room was just one story up, isn't it? Yes, that's right. In a way, we were neighbors, I suppose. So did you know the victim? Were you friends? What's the matter with Soseki-san now? It was an innocent enough question, wasn't it? Why does he seem so shaken by it? Well, suppose he wasn't a complete stranger. But did he ever invite me to his room? Never! On my honor, I swear it. What an extreme reaction. You're probably wishing you'd never asked now, aren't you, Mr. Naruhodo? When we found him here, I felt wretched, which is why I sent word asking you to come. Though that inspector came over there. Oh. So, Inspector, what was the victim's name? Who was he? Mr. William Shamspear. He was a lodger here. Well, that's really unflattering. Wrong era. As you can probably tell, he was an actor. A bit of a dead loss, as it happens. Or just dead. Mr. Shamspear. It was the landlord, old Mr. Garadeb, and the other lodger, Mr. Natsume, who found him. The fellow didn't rise at his usual hour, so Garadeb got worried and kicked the door down. But doesn't Mr. Garadeb have a bad leg? Yeah, you're right there. It was that jittery Japanese hunchback over there who actually did the kicking. Really? Soseki-san? The victim was pretty hard up, it seems. Even done some time inside for petty crimes. He had no money, no place to go, and no friends. His only acquaintances were the people in this house. Miserable life and a miserable end to it. So what exactly is Mr. Natsume still doing here? He's not involved in the investigation, so shouldn't you have sent him away from the crime scene? Well, I'm not saying it's because the fellow looks odd or anything, or that he acts suspicious. But I thought it would be prudent to take a statement from the cohabiter. You nearly said culprit there, didn't you? Oh dear. Mr. Natsume appears to be under suspicion again. And it certainly seems that way. He does just come across as such an odd fellow, doesn't he? Poor man, how unfortunate. Anyway, I can't say much until the coroner gets here. But I don't think the fellow's been a goner that long. His body's still warm. Even if the inspector would allow it, I don't think I could bring myself to touch a dead body. Okay, well, the only thing I can inspect. Can I go do a back? Correct. Okay. The only thing I can examine seems to be Mr. Hairlock Sholmes. Mr. Sholmes, what are you doing? Ah, you need only observe to know it, my dear fellow. Investigating naturally. There's nothing natural about that pose. Mr. Sholmes, have you made some miraculous discovery? Patience, my dear madame, patience. We've not been here in this room 5 minutes. So far, all I've managed to deduce is what actually happened. Oh my goodness! But isn't that everything we need to know, Mr. Sholmes? Now that you propose the idea, I believe one could indeed see it that way. At the present time, I have managed to draw 2 incontrovertible conclusions. First is that there was a physical struggle here last night, which the victim fought for his life. Mr. Matsume, what's wrong? Is something that Mr. Sholmes said significant somehow? No, don't mind me. Forget I was here. And my second conclusion, well, I know he didn't do it, but he is sure acting sus. I agree with Gregson there. Is that there was a poison lingering in the air here last night that passed the victim's lips. Well, this is probably wrong, but it's like another case of, oh, and there's also poison. Another case of this? Nonsense. Alright, Mr. Natsume, why are you reacting so extremely to Mr. Sholmes' deductions? No, please. Pretend I'm not here. Invisible, ineffable, inscrutable, insignificant. Impossible to ignore. You must tell us everything, Mr. Sholmes. Spare no detail. But of course, let the theatrical tragedy before us be unraveled by my great deductions, presented by your pleasure in 2 acts. Now we've heard some truly astonishing great deductions from Mr. Sholmes in the past. No doubt this will be no exception. What miracles will unfold before our eyes this time? So, my dear fellows, for your delight and wonder, let the curtain rise. For Hairlock Sholmes' Logic and Reasoning Spectacular, Act 1. Careful observation of the victim reveals to us the events that transpired in this disconsolate room last night. Foam at the mouth of the deceased clearly indicates the use of poison. Next to the victim, we notice a large dining plate which contains, you'll observe, 1/2 of a sizable bar of soap. Meaningful, undoubtedly. Why is the soap set so purposefully upon the dish? Like the victim's last supper, in fact, yes. Could it be that the man was about to eat it? Of course, the fork reveals the answer. It appears that the young man's appetite was his undoing. Taking up arms in the form of his cutlery, the victim engaged in a deadly battle for his life. Yet the struggle against his hunger was in vain, for in the end he couldn't resist devouring the slippery feast. The London's foul soap is besmirched by foul poison. Yes, the victim's life was claimed by poison that tainted the contents of the plate. The soap and the lather about the young man's mouth are too perfectly matched to ignore. The cause of death was clearly intoxication due to excessive ingestion of foul soap. Though personally I have a greater interest in this taste of foul candle wax, of course. The cause of death identified, we proceed to Act 2, where we ponder the next question. Was this suicide or murder? The audience will recall that death occurred during the victim's last supper. Did the man die and die alone? The single teacup suggests the answer. To draw a conclusion on such meager evidence would be foolish, however, certainly. The careful criminal would have absconded with his own cup to cover his tracks. Well, allow me to lift the veil of doubt, my dear fellow. Indeed, what reveals the answer, of course, is the broken lock. Though forced open now at the time of the incident, this lock was locked. And the sole key was in the victim's pocket. In other words, the victim consumed the poison. He must have been alone. Alone with his inferior soap, from whence wafted an inferior scent. And with that acrid aroma lingering in the air, the victim met his end, in tragic solitude. We can take comfort only in the fact that his soul was well cleansed on its way to the hereafter. Thus concludes the final act of Sherlock Holmes' great deduction. Just one thing, Mr. Sholmes. You're disposed to identifying just one thing, aren't you, Mr. Naruhodo? Pray, what concerns you? Well, no matter how hungry he was, do you really think the man would have eaten soap? It's quite apparent that this man had barely a penny to his name. It is a curious thing, but to one so destitute, soap can suddenly appear quite irresistibly appetizing. How extraordinary. In truth, I have tried a little soap myself in the past. You've eaten it, you mean? My dear fellows, it was some time ago now. My postulation was that it would cleanse my gut. And did it? As I writhed in agony on the floor and spilt the contents of my stomach, yes, I believe it did. The experience taught me a valuable lesson. Soap is quite poisonous. It has an unpleasant taste and leads to great discomfort. In summary, I cannot recommend it. Believe me, I wouldn't eat it even if you did. There's something that troubles me as well, actually. Oh, what's that? It's Mr. Natsume. Ah. I couldn't help noticing him shuddering and quivering out of the corner of his eye. Almost as if Mr. Sholmes' deductions touched a nerve somehow. Nonsense. Well, that's clenched teeth. That clenched teeth episode didn't last. I think, judging by Mr. Natsume's reaction, the great detective's deductions may need some gentle corrections in order to reach the actual truth. Yes, Mr. Sholmes' observations and deductions are somewhat a little too sharp. He has a tendency to hit the nail on the side of the head and drive it into an obtuse angle. When he does that, it falls to us to straighten things out. Alright then, let's see what we can do. Yes, we must pick out the keywords in Mr. Sholmes' quite brilliant deductions, and discreetly exchange them for something that makes a little more sense. If we can do that, I'm sure we'll arrive at what Mr. Sholmes meant to say in the first place. In that case, are you ready for the second performance of the day? Once again, my dear fellows, for your continued delight and wonder, let the curtain rise. For Sherlock Holmes' logic and reasoning spectacular. Well, you can't deny that a fork implies the man was eating something or about to eat something. Yes, that's true. If I were to decide to eat some soap, I would prefer to use a fork than to attempt it with chopsticks. I would have just stuck it, like, in my mouth and bit off of it, but whatever. In the hypothetical, I would decide to eat soap. And of course, only half the bar of soap is left on the plate. But might there not be some other explanation? Something material that proves whether or not the man really ate some soap. Do you think he was drinking tea with his soap? The cup's empty, so there's no way of knowing. How about this for an idea? Perhaps the cup was full of water, and he was dissolving the soap in it so he could gulp it as much down as possible. Please remember that he may not actually have been the soap lover that he's been made out to be. Can't do the stain yet. I suppose you'd eat soap with a fork, would you? I don't think it's a question of which implement you'd use. We shouldn't eat soap, full stop. But then why? Why does this man have a fork in his hand? Oh dear, I understand your frustration, Mr. Naruhodo, but please don't take it out on me. The point is, if we decide the man used this fork to eat the soap, we wouldn't be changing Mr. Sholmes' deduction. So we really have to consider some other clues. Well, that was kind of meta. There we go. Find the other piece of the soap. Other piece of soap. Look, there's more soap on the floor here. So, Shamspear must really have loved the stuff. Let's not jump to conclusions, Mr. Naruhodo. Look closely at this soap. Do you see that it would fit together perfectly with the half bar on the table? What? How can that be? I think that they are two halves of the same bar that broke apart. Yeah, that's the thing we present.
Take that!
Could it be that the man was about to eat it? Of course, the other piece of soap reveals the answer. It's being the other half of the soap on the table. In short, the victim was not eating soap at all. But it's obvious, really, for no depths of hunger could drive any man to attempt to eat soap. Even I, with my unquenchable thirst for practical knowledge, took only a single bite. That begs the question of how the man was poisoned, because there's no sign of any food on the table. An excellent observation, Mr. Naruhodo, and one that furnishes us with the answer we seek. For Lennon's foul soap is besmirched by foul poison. Yes, the victim's life was claimed by poison that tainted the contents of the plate. Mr. Sholmes is still pushing the soap argument then. Perhaps he's suggesting the man licked the soap rather than ate it. If soap in London is that poisonous, I don't think I would want to be washing my hands with it. But there are no signs of any food in this room at all. Of course, food isn't the only thing that passes people's lips, is it? Yeah, it's a cup. Yes, a Western vessel for the serving of infusions of dried tea leaves. It's a teacup, Mr. Naruhodo, as we well know. Stop putting on airs. And it's empty. Ah, so we've already established that the victim wasn't eating soap when he died. However, there is significant evidence to suggest that he was drinking tea. My thoughts exactly.
Take that!
Yes, the victim's life was claimed by poison that tainted the teacup. Indeed, cups have been the vessel of choice for practicing poisoners over the centuries. And it would appear that this victim drank every last drop. There's no sign of food anywhere in the room. Which leads us to the immutable conclusion. The cause of death was clearly intoxication due to the ingestion of poison contained in this teacup. Cause of death identified, we proceed to Act 2, where we ponder the next question. Was it suicide or murder? The audience will recall that death occurred during the victim's Last Supper. Did the man dine and die alone? The single teacup suggests the answer. The Western vessel for infused hot drinks again. It's already featured heavily in our deductions so far. Yes, we can imagine that shortly before his death, Mr. Shamsphere was having a drink of tea. There would be nothing remarkable about that, but what troubles me is Mr. Natsume's reaction when we heard Mr. Shalom suggested. There's more to this deduction than it seems. We must closely examine the scene of the crime again for more clues. It's empty, and it's the only cup on the table. It appears so, yes. And when you consider those facts, Mr. Sholm's reasoning seems highly logical. But it's always the same in these deductions. The real truth is always buried a little deeper than the great detective suggests. Mr. Naruhodo, you seem very dubious of Mr. Sholmes all of a sudden. Cat. Wow, that's a big oversight. It's another Western vessel for it's a teacup, and it's and two is empty. Given that he's actually drinking this one in his hand, we can assume that this is the cup from which Mr. Shamsphere was actually drinking. But if that's the case, this changes everything. Everything we've deduced up till now is turned on its head. I have a bad feeling about this. I almost don't want to say it. Yes, I know exactly how you feel. We gotta...
Take that!
give it to Soseki. Did the man die and die alone? The other teacup suggests the answer. Yes, there are two separate teacups in this room all along. Ah. In other words, this is a strong indication that at the victim's Last Supper, there was a guest present. Okay, so we know the perpetrator has this silhouette. He has a little bit of a beard. Okay. At the very least, we can now say now with certainty that somebody else was here in this room last night taking tea with the victim. What are you talking about? Utterly, unbelievably, unjustly unreasonable. To draw a conclusion on such meager evidence would be foolish, however, certainly. In which case, what more can we deduce about this possible guest at the table? Well, allow me to lift the veil of doubt, my dear fellow. What do you mean to say? You know who exactly was in the room at the time of the victim's death? Indeed, what reveals the answer is the broken lock. I'm not sure I like where this deduction is going now. I'm afraid it's too late to go back to the Halcyon days of eating too much soap. The identity of the guest who was in here last night when the victim passed away is something I have a very bad feeling about. Well, you can try to ignore your feelings, but we cannot ignore the truth, Mr. Naruhodo. No, I suppose not. Time to look around again. Shit. Oh dear, the latch is most definitely broken, isn't it? The door was kicked in by Mr. Natsume, according to what Mr. Garadeb told the inspector. We knew his short, thin little legs had so much strength in them. Who knew? I'm not sure the length of his legs is in any way significant here. Perhaps this says more about the poor state of the door than about Mr. Natsume's strength, actually. Careful, if he's overheard that remark, he's almost certainly have a lively response. I don't know. Can this broken lock really tell us anything about who is here? It's empty. Empty of liquid, but full of air. What makes you think, doesn't it? It makes me think that you're full of hot air. We should be thinking about who else was in the room at the time. Bother, Susato-san's quip in response was cleverer than my original riddle. At first glance, it seems the only things in this room are the makeshift stage and the costumes. I overlooked these three books initially. I wonder what they are. Let's see. The titles read. Picture of Monsieur Lecoq, Canterbury Yearnings, and a meal for Gaboro. Wait, I'm sure I've heard those titles before. It could just be an incredible coincidence, but they're the exact same 3 books that Mr. Natsume purchased the other day. What? Yes, on the day of the unfortunate incident when Miss Green was stabbed. Soseki-san had just been to a bookshop and bought them, that's right. And now those 3 titles are here in the room of the victim. Yet Mr. Natsume claims never to have been here before. What does this mean, do you think? I really don't know what to make of it. I know what to make of it. Present.
Take that!
Break! Indeed, what reveals the answer, of course, is the pile of familiar books. Quite so, it is no mere coincidence that these 3 titles are here in this room. It's the link to the truth. Mr. Natsume, you purchased these books 4 days ago at a secondhand bookshop. That's a coincidence. In that case, you will be able to bring the same 3 titles from your own room, will you not? This very moment? No, never. Non-negotiable. So you can't bring your own copies here. Proves that these 3 books are in fact yours. I purchased the books 4 days ago and returned to your lodgings. You were arrested the next day. So you could conceivably have brought the books here on that evening, but you never mentioned that. In other words, you could only have brought these 3 books here into the victim's room. Last night, having returned to your lodgings after the trial concluded at the Old Bailey. In short, there is only one possible conclusion. The victim died here in this room last night as a result of poisoning. And that same night, the victim had a visitor. And that visitor... was you, Mr. Soseki Natsume. And yes, I noticed that little wide-eyed sprite. This concludes the final act of Hairlap Sheld's great deduction. Soseki Natsume at the scene. Not again, not again, not again. Not again! Well then, Mr. Natsume. It would appear you're gonna have to accompany me back down to the yard, again. But wait. Hold your horses. Yes? Door, key, locked. Entry, exit, entirely impossible. He's so flustered, he's being even stranger than normal. Well, do you think that's an alibi? You could have just made a copy. What? You live in the same building after all. You'd have plenty of opportunity, I'm sure. But... misery me. Sorry, Sarah, you'll get your chance to give your side of the story later. The facts speak for themselves, Mr. Mustache. You horrible Hairlock Sholmes. He really has found himself an arch rival now, hasn't he? Come now, no dilly-dallying. Outside, there's a carriage waiting. Locum student Mr. Naruhodo Esquire. I never imagined I'd be in this position again, but... you have to help me, please, please. I'm innocent. After I just, like, put you in that situation, personally. Alright, I understand. We'll come to your cell later and talk about it. One more thing. Oh, yes? My poor little kitty cat. Please give him his breakfast for me. And so, his evil curse still apparently unbroken. Soseki-san found himself once again the prime suspect in a case of murder. Thanks to the incriminating deduction by the great detective. My dear fellows, that honor belongs to you. Yes, we're gonna show someone to be guilty and then later switch and prove him innocent. Because plot. Well, at least that means Inspector Gregson is no longer here. We can examine the crime scene in more detail now. Yes, that's right. Ah, and of course. What? Have you forgotten what the inspector mentioned before? It was the landlord, Mr. Geradev, who discovered Mr. Shamsphere. Ah, Mr. John Geradev, yes? I expect we would find him in his sitting room on the top floor as usual. Right, we must remember to go and talk to him later then. There's so much on these. There's not much on these shelves, is there? Just this wine glass and bottle. And both of them are cracked. Yes, not much use, are they? What's the matter? I was just reminded of the Reaper, that's all. Prosecutor Lord Van Zykes. Yes, he's so reckless with his wine glasses. I was thinking it's a waste and that he should donate some to the needy. You can suggest it next time we meet. Look at that extravagant bright. Look at these extravagant bright costumes. Somehow they look out of place in this room with its grim, shady goings-on. This one looks like a king's attire. A king. I've always dreamt of being a king. Oh, I think you'd be more suited to a feudal lord, a daimyo or such like, with a chromage topknot. Every Japanese man wishes he had a chromage. Oh, you look wonderful with one, and you already have the sword. Can you imagine what would happen if I walked around the streets of London with a cron mage and a sword? What's this? It looks like a part of an envelope, I think. Yes, I think you might be right. Perhaps it was torn off when the letter was opened. Is that significant? Yes, this is Ace Attorney. Well, it's a little out of place, perhaps, when you look around the room. There's no sign of a letter or the rest of the envelope, in fact, is there? Ah, she's right. And yet here we have the torn off end of the envelope. It just strikes me as unusual. I agree. We better take this just in case. Proceeds to leave it there. Okay. Can't do the, like, floorboard. At the window. As you've seen from the outside, the window is completely bricked up. A vestige of the former window tax that Britons had to pay. What a strange thing they used to tax in Great Britain. I mean, making people pay for the number of windows they had in their property. It's extraordinary. It's heartbreaking to think that the poor having to block up their windows just to avoid an unaffordable tax. Oh, what is it, Miss Susato? If you look closely, a number of the bricks are loose. Oh yes, look as though an amateur had broken out of a few of them just here. Was it Mr. Shamsphere who did it, I wonder, being the lodger renting this room? Oh, look at this, Mr. Naruhodo. On the outside, there's a little ledge, and there's something on it. What, outside? Got some soap. Ugh, it's so cold outside. You can feel it through this gap. It did snow last night. It would be cold. More importantly, what is it on the ledge out there? What are these snow-covered lumps? It's more bars of soap. Soap? What are bars of soap doing lying up on a ledge outside the window? I have no idea. the pair of them look rather charming like that. Still, it's very strange, isn't it? Bars of soap lined up outside the window. I think perhaps we should take one. There are two after all. Oh dear. I suppose we could. Oh, what's this? Look here at the soap. Ah. Do you see in the middle there? There's a patch that's different, has a different color. It's a sort of transparent, but some sort of fancy design, I suppose. Only in Great Britain. It looks like the Hinomaru flag of Japan, doesn't it? How wonderful. It's probably a very expensive brand. Expensive? Then what's it doing in this ramshackled room? Bar of soap has been entered into the court record. Oh, the poor man. So young to die. You suppose it was a very painful death, being poisoned as he was? I don't know. All we can do now is hope that he'll be reborn to a better life. Yes, I suppose you're right. I wonder. Do you think that putting our hands together in a Japanese prayer will help a British soul? Sorry. I made sure I had a reference to at the ready for just such an occasion as this, actually. This book is entitled The Beginner's Guide to Praying for the Departed, the British Way. I'll just reread it now. One moment. There's quite a spine on that book, isn't there? Here we have another disproportionately large machine. This looks like a meter of some kind. Ah, this is a gas meter, I think. It seems that in this district, residents pay for gas as they use it with coins. Ah, I see. Yes, now you've pointed it out. I can see that there's a slot just here that looks like it would take a coin. So you mean if you put a coin in here... That's right, that would buy you about 2 hours of gas for lights and heating. So if you were a poor person with no money, you'd have to sleep in the freezing cold. Yes, or if you were a scatterbrain with no change because you forgot to exchange your money at the bank. Thank goodness there's no meter in our office. This is a gas wall light, isn't it? It must be connected to a gas pipe in the wall. Gas lights. A gas stove. London really is a city of gas. But now that I think about it, Mr. and Mrs. Geradev had an open fire on the top floor, didn't they? Oh yes, you're right. I don't recall seeing a gas stove up there. Well, I much prefer a real fire anyway. It's so much cozier. This is some sort of makeshift stage, I think, isn't it? Where does the audience sit, though, for the nightly Shakespeare performance? Actors aspiring to the great stage must practice their art, Mr. Naruhodo, with or without an audience. In fact, on a related note, perhaps you should set up a mock bench for the defense in your office. What? Then you can practice your art every single day. I'll think about it, if you promise to don a beard and play the role of the judge. Well, if that would help you achieve your goal. This I have to see. Wait, was there a toggle over just to... There was nothing more to inspect on the toggle because it was so short? Okay. Well, it's getting late for me, so I'm gonna have to end recording here. And pick it up later. Kind of an awkward spot to do it. But, I don't know, I just have to do it, so. I'm gonna save here.